With the world's second largest population, a fast-growing economy, a booming global tech sector, and a mobile international workforce, many Indian workplace environments are dynamic and primed for greater inclusion initiatives. Out and Equal has been working in India since 2017 with local partners Pride Circle, Community Business, and Interweave, as well as other partner companies and organizations in India to increase LGBTQ workplace inclusion. Since then, we have organized impactful forums and roundtables that bring together Indian and multinational companies across all industries. This year, we've launched more resources ranging from allyship to mental health in India. We hope you'll join us on December 11th for our full-day virtual India Forum. From the historic striking down of Section 377, the decriminalization of homosexuality, to emerging corporate leadership, there is so much momentum and work ahead in India. Thank you to all of our panelists for being here today.
In January last year, senior executives at a multinational shared their personal stories with the entire global organization, which was live streamed in 96 countries. One told how earlier in her career, she had routinely avoided revealing that she never went to the college. She said that anytime a group conversation turned to what school did you go to, she dodged answering or changed the subject. Another story came from a senior executive who was of Southeast Asian descent. In an earlier job, that individual felt that he stuck out like a sore thumb among his white colleagues. His decision was to own it, and he grew a very large beard, rendering him even more noticeable. That was reaffirming for him that he belongs. You would not believe how much of a positive impact these stories had on people in the audience. It was noted that anecdotes, personal journeys, especially from senior leaders, about the struggle to fit in or to be their authentic selves at work can be a powerful tool to nurture a sense of belonging among an entire workforce. According to the Harvard Business Review, if employees feel like they belong, companies reap substantial bottom line benefits. High belonging was linked to whopping 56% increase in job performance, a 50% drop in turnover risk, and a 75% reduction in sick days. For a 10,000 employee company, this would result in annual savings of more than $52 million. Employees with higher workplace belonging also showed a 167% increase in their employer promoter score. Hello, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you all to yet another exciting discussion on forging a path for belonging in the shifting Indian workplace. My name is Srini Ramaswamy, and I'm the co-founder of Pride Circle, India's leading diversity and inclusion consultancy with a mission to enable and empower India Inc. to foster LGBT plus inclusion. And with me today are four thought leaders, and let me welcome all of them. Zaina Patel, who's a Director, Diversity and Inclusion at KPMG India. We have Veda Prasad, Senior Vice President, Global Services, Asia Pacific at Northern Trust. Prachi Rastogi, Diversity and Inclusion Leader at IBM. Ramki Venkatachalam, Senior Vice President and Global Delivery Leader at Bank of America, who will share their journeys, experiences, and talk about paradigm shift of Indian corporate culture towards a better and more inclusive workplace for LGBT plus and allies. And this could not come at a better time when we are celebrating the 2-year anniversary of revoking of Section 377 in India. So let's begin. So I would like to kick off the discussion by defining one of those words in the title of the session, belonging. And I would like to know from each one of you, what does it mean to you to truly belong to the workplace? Zaina, would like to go with you. Would like to hear what you think.
Thank you, Srini. For me, being an out, proud, brown trans woman, belonging has a totally different understanding and implication for me at the workplace. While I have been very fortunate and very privileged to cut across a lot of barriers that people usually face at the workplace, if I were to ask and to reflect for just a moment on the current economic, social, political climate that we are all going through, it doesn't matter whether we are in the US or in South Asia, we are all going through a definite social turmoil. And in an age where everyone is talking about giving certificates in nationalism, I think the true sense of belonging comes from a fact that you can truly be yourself. For example, Zainab is a Muslim name, and to be able to be truly comfortable in my skin within the organization's fabric, I am encouraged to not only bring my trans identity and expression to work, but also kind of create a cultural space within the organization where my views as someone who comes in from a minority community is equally accepted, valued, and respected at the table. It means for me, the sense of belonging comes from the fact that you are carving niches within the organization space to be able to bring not only everyone to the table, but giving a fair chance for everyone to grow equitably. Hence, the sense of belonging for me actually follows very good D&I efforts. That you may have excellent D&I efforts, but the sense of true belonging has to come in from this culture being imbibed within each and every staff member.
Thanks, Zainab. Ramki?
Yeah, the whole belonging basically is an environment that we create in our workplace where everybody feels respected and they truly feel that they have the freedom to express themselves irrespective of the cultural background or the gender, the orientation, or whatever differences that exist. People are able to appreciate each other and coexist in a very conducive environment. Second is the workplace is something we don't create only for the majority. It has to be for each and every associate or employee in the organization. Everyone should feel they belong, and that's the only way we are able to get all the commitment from every person in the organization. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Ramki. Veda?
Thanks, Srini. Last week, we held a speaker series in which one of our employees spoke out about her personal journey of coming out to her friends, to her family, and in the workplace. It was an incredibly honest conversation, and she described it through the concept shared by Brené Brown in her TED Talks of a conscious choice of belonging, being accepted for all that one is, versus fitting in, which is being accepted for only those parts that fit into the beliefs of the group. She went on to further state that the more she tried to fit in, the more that she shrank. So to me, personal belonging is filling your entire space.
Thanks, Veda. Thanks for sharing that. And Prachi?
Thanks, Srini. Belonging for me is when I can bring my whole selves to wherever I go, whether it's work or any other group or place that I'm going to. So as COVID started, we hired quite a few transgender people in IBM. And the way they said that they are not comfortable opening up to people outside at IBM, but totally okay with coming out and being open about it at IBM. They feel comfortable, they feel secure, and they feel safe at IBM. So I thought that was a testimony, or that was a real definition of belonging. And also 3 years back, when I was offered the role of diversity and inclusion, and especially working with working parents, new parents, and I'm not married at 42, I don't have kids. And nobody really asked me at IBM, how will you decide policies and programs at IBM? I totally belong to the company I work for, and that is belongingness for me.
Thanks all of you for the lovely definition and what belonging means to you. So let's change gears. I would like to ask you the next question again to all of you. That we have seen significant shifts in companies' efforts to foster culture of belonging through a more intersectional and inclusive lens over the years. And this is especially after the Section 377 judgment in India. Can you tell us a bit about how your company has demonstrated thought leadership and visible commitment?
So at KPMG in India, what we have done is what many other thought leaders within the India Incorporated space has been doing. We really took to heart the mission of taking stigma and discrimination off, if any, within the organization by having a sustained campaign which talked about the Section 377 judgment of the Supreme Court, uh, brought about one-on-one sensitization sessions on LGBTIQ issues and launched the Ally of Inclusion. Now, this was the first time they also hired uh, LGBTIQ persons at the workplace in an open manner, and our prevention of sexual harassment policies at the workplace are now inclusive of discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. As we move forward, we're also kind of looking at job descriptions being more gender neutral and a whole lot of policies and benefits. But the most important part is bringing to life a culture of alliedness. And this, I believe, is not restricted to a judgment or reading down or toning down or bringing in a particular law. It is about fostering a culture where everyone is not only a spectator or waves a rainbow flag or has a pink unicorn on their table or a land card, but they are actually active allies, not in the sense of being nouns, but actually verbs, in helping people who come in from different disadvantaged groups to be their true selves too at work. So this, in short, is what we kind of do at KPMG.
Yeah, thank you. Veda, how about you?
Yes, so Zaned's raised a number of really great points. And at Northern Trust, we've done many of the same things. I think one of the things that we did that was, I wouldn't say controversial, but so we did in this age right now where we are still looking at legalizing same-sex marriage in India. And at this point, we're not there yet, but we are offering same-sex health benefits to same-sex couples. And I know many of the other panelists, you are also doing the same. And I think that just really demonstrates you kind of putting your money where your mouth is a little bit, and you can, as Zaned was saying, you can walk the talk, but it's really about demonstrating what we've committed to in the organization, to say that every person deserves those health benefits, and just because right now the law doesn't allow us to do that doesn't mean that we are going to stop those benefits for same-sex partners.
Ramki?
Yeah, if you look at Bank of America, the focus really starts at the top. Our CEO, Brian Moynihan himself, is the chairman of Diversity and Inclusion Council. As a result, what happens is there is a lot of focus, a lot of emphasis on creating the diverse workforce as well as creating an inclusive work culture. So as a result, what happened, there was a lot of LGBT-related resources and programs that were available at the bank level. And as soon as Section 377 was announced in India, we were able to reuse all those materials. We created a number of awareness sessions. And as we approached this topic, there were a lot of questions even from the senior people, right? Why should we do this? What does it mean to us? Why are we focusing on so much? Do we have so many people, LGBT people in India? Those kind of questions came up. So we had to create a number of unique awareness sessions for those people right from the top, and encourage people to enhance their knowledge, widen their perspectives, and then we cascaded downwards towards the rest of the people. The next is through the Ally Network, we increased our membership. Today, almost 12% of our associates are registered Ally Network members. And they're actively contributing to a number of discussions. Huge number of people have helped us identify those people who are not able to express themselves. And few people have come out at work, and that number is growing. And those are all some of the success stories that we have created immediately after Section 377 was lifted.
Fantastic. Prachi?
Okay, so Trini, thanks for the question. We had all the policies and programs much before the legislation. So we had the medical insurance, the same-sex partners, gender affirmation surgery, and in case somebody has adopted children or has children, and we were okay with we were totally we have the policies of making them travel with children for work, and we pay for the children and caretaker as well. So that was there. So the two things that have changed after 2018, the 377 read down, is that one, our allies have increased by 45% as we talk today. And that has happened because we started working on expanding mindsets and inviting people to be allies, totally vocal, visible, upstanders. And the second thing which changes is that we celebrate 377 read down really with a lot of pride. June Pride Month was always there, and now 377 read down also. While there's a long way to go, but it's really important to celebrate the small wins.
Yeah, very nicely put. Thanks so much, Prachi, for sharing. Ramki, I would like to, come back to you to, some of the programs and initiatives that you spoke of. And I want to sort of do a double click and, ask you about, the key focus areas of LGBT plus inclusion and belonging at Bank of America in India. Can you share some of the achievements, lesson learned, some of the real life stories as you made progress? I know you shared a bit about it, and I was curious to, hear more. So if you could share and throw more light on that, please.
Thanks, Rini. I think the key focus areas have been, like I said, creating the right leadership mindset, and they play a crucial role if you have to change the culture in the organization. So that is our key focus area. And on the back of that, we continue to strengthen our ally network, encourage people to come out at work, and also enhance the learning resources, which I think is a huge differentiator. As people gain more knowledge, they are more open to come out and support. And as far as accomplishment is concerned, like I said, 12% of the people are registered as ally. Today, we have created a significant amount of strength in the organization who are carrying on all these activities. Created gender neutral washrooms and transgender transition support, same-sex partner insurance coverage. And in fact, just to give you a real life story, there was a bunch of people who went out on a trekking, and because of the awareness sessions and courageous conversations that we have had with our people, there was one of the registered ally member along with the people. This was outside the office, right? And they went as a group, and as they were climbing down the hill, they say a couple of foreigners climbing up the hill, and both of them were women, and they were holding their hands. And the rest of the team members were passing some lewd comments, and they were saying, look, they are lesbians, and they are this, they are that. So this ally registered member, he quietly listened to it. He felt very uncomfortable. So he kept walking. And on that night, when they did the camping, he opened up. He mustered the courage in front of 20, 30 people. He spoke about it. He talked about what does LGBT mean to the society and why it is important to recognize the differences in the society and so on. And ultimately, the entire group appreciated it, and they all said that they will change their mindset. So that, in my opinion, I think is a difference that we are able to make because of all the awareness sessions that we are creating.
Thanks, Ramki. I think you shared a wonderful, real life example. And it also talks about the courage, like you rightly mentioned, of this individual who ensured that the individual comes back to the office and they are able to share this and in some sense create that awareness so that you can have wider and broader acceptance. So thanks so much for sharing that. It is a beautiful story, and I think some life lessons that we all can take back. Thanks again. Zainab, I'll come to you. In your initial thoughts as you were sharing in the panel, you briefly spoke about the intersectionality from an Indian lens. So I want to sort of, piggyback on that and would like to really understand from you, especially when we see intersectionality at times seen as overpowering the key issue. There is this common debate, particularly around the Pride Month and the Pride March celebrations, about raising other issues, and we fear that that may dilute the expectations of the LGBT plus community. Would love to hear your take on this,
Thank you. This is a topic which I hold very close to my heart. Having served in the United Nations for a little more than a decade and worked on different issues of intersectionality, my personal view, Srini, is that there are many, many ways to be queer. And the fact that when we talk about queerness, we talk about a whole variety of expression, identity politics, orientation, preferences, economic status. So for me, it also talks about how it fits into different personal identities in varying degrees. For a person like me, it may play a very small and yet significant role. And for others in the spectrum, it could be something very forefront, it could be something very major in their lives. And that adds to the history of marginalization that people go through. Another thing that when we talk about community building, specifically in the Indian context, we have to realize that queer community building is actually a privilege. It takes effort, time, a lot of social mobilization, and a lot of courage for people to cut across religion, caste, economic status, and privileges to come together and talk as a common group, and hence become the pillars of community building. And one also has to kind of agree with this reality that as the Indian queer pride movement actually grows, and you actually see I started off with my first Pride March in Delhi in 2009, subsequent to the reading down of Section 377 in the Delhi High Court. If you've seen, Pride has now moved away from being an urban, English-speaking celebration to a peri-urban, rural celebration, mixture of language, expression, color, identity, uh, linguistic. It's a celebration which is truly diverse in a country like India, which has so many different hues. And as in this pride movement in India actually grows, we have to, it is very important for all of us, especially those who are working in corporate spaces, to recognize that LGBTIQ is not a monolithic community. It is not a homogeneous community. And that liberation will actually come not in isolation, where it will only come when we truly respect. And you talked about the term of belonging. So for me, belonging means increasing accessibility, operating when you are in solidarity with different movements of marginalized people. And that itself is true for us today, that we have groups, we recognize that multiculturalism is a huge hot topic today when we are talking about diversity and inclusion, and that LGBT cannot be seen only as a separate pillar, but we will have uh, intersectionality actually cutting across all of the pillars that we've traditionally worked on. So my view is that intersectionality is no longer an essential, it is a desirable because of the socio-cultural political frameworks that we are working in today, whether it is liberation or from the fact that we are more evolved as a social entity.
Thanks, Zainab. I'm going to, you spoke about the role of allies, right? So I'm going to go to Veda about this. Veda, you've been a great ally, and I've seen and have got so much inspiration from your work that you are leading at Northern Trust. And I know that, it's a huge responsibility, and allies play such a key role in building a culture of belonging, which the topic is around that, the conversation that we're having today. But sometimes the affirmative action to inclusion gets perceived as overdoing it or making it easier for underrepresented and minority groups or employees. So how do you engage the majority population in ally programs so that they feel very much part of the conversation and are important to the organization?
Yeah, no, it's an absolutely great point, Srini. And all of us here today, right? All of us have many, many, many different ERG groups that focus on lots of different and underrepresented employees, right? Whether it's persons with disabilities, veterans, women, and we've all had these for years. And like everybody else on this panel, Northern Trust India has a very young and very dynamic and energetic workforce, right? We're dealing with a millennial workforce, and they're all very socially responsible and socially aware. So, I mean, we began our journey in 2017, our LGBT plus journey. And there was a lot of internal excitement that we were going to start openly discussing this aspect of inclusion in our organization. And at the same time, we also recognize that many of our partners, and at Northern Trust, Srini, as you know, at Northern Trust, we call our employees partners. But many of our partners had not learned about gender identity or gender preference, either in school or at home, right? They knew of the concept, but they didn't know what it meant. And it just wasn't a topic that was talked about. So while everybody was excited about taking this on, we knew we had a lot of work to do and a lot of teaching to do. So we kind of started with, and very, very similar to what Ramki's done at Bank of America, we started with our executive management team. We did in-person training sessions for our executive management team and our business leaders. So that was across the entire spectrum of our organization, all our different business units. And that we rolled out for over 700 of our managers. And then for the wider workforce, so for everybody, we created an e-learning module. And this again was just to kind of raise sensitivity, get people used to the language. And over 70% of our staff completed that e-learning module. And then we launched our ERG in mid-2018, in July of 2018 is when we launched our ERG. And so to your point, at that point, we didn't have any partners that were out within our organization. And so we knew we needed to create this ally network. And so part of our strategy was to kind of further develop what we had already built upon with those manager training sessions and the e-module session that we did as well. So in partnership with Diane, we created an ally training program. We do those quarterly. And they're really great sessions because we start with unconscious bias. We help people understand some of the biases that they might or they might not have. And then we look at a number of case studies, and very, very similar. And actually, Ramki, I'm going to take your example that you had from your the weekend hiking trip. I'm going to turn that into a case study. And because what we do is we kind of present those real life situations and ask people what would they do. And so hearing the story and then hearing what actually happened, that'll be a really great one for us as well. So thanks for sharing that, Ramki, and I'm going to steal that for my own training program. But I think what we do, and so to go back to your question about, how do we engage that larger workforce? So everybody who goes through the ally training becomes part of our ERG. And we use this group of active, passionate people to curate new and innovative ways that we can educate this young millennial workforce about what does it mean to be part of this community and how can they create a more inclusive environment.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Veda. You spoke about engaging your employees and leaders and stakeholders in the journey, which becomes the key. And I want to go to Prachi for this. IBM has been, in my career, an organization that I've always been inspired with. The 100+ years of journey on inclusion and diversity is something that, we are all aware of, and something that, we closely follow. At least I'm someone who follows the work very closely. There's lots to learn every time I look at some of these efforts. So my question to you, Prachi, is around the thought leadership, is around that IBM has been the pioneer in diversity and equity and inclusion space. Very vocal, visible when it comes to the LGBT plus inclusion globally and in India. At the time where we had very few companies in India talking about the efforts externally. So I would be very keen to hear from you about your experiences, how you've managed to engage both the internal and external stakeholders when it comes to the advocacy, it comes to the programs and initiatives.
Lovely question. Thanks, Srini. And Veda, you will love this this anecdote that I'm going to share before really responding to what Srini's asked. Now, a few days ago, we were doing a Leading Without Bias training for some of our senior most leaders at IBM. And many of them said that, and it was a basically overarching view of diversity and inclusion, which has all diversity constituents. And many of them said that great to go through this training, but what we actually want to learn more about is the LGBT plus community, because that is where we clearly see that there is enough need for us to be more aware, be more alert, and it's really important for us to be more educated. So that is our senior leaders at IBM, my internal stakeholders. But I'll come to a formal answer as well, Srini. That basically 3 pillars have worked with us at IBM, and 109 years of journey have helped, but we never really, we value it very much, but we absolutely know that we have to work every single day to keep at it and to further the journey of inclusion. So 3 pillars. One is leadership accountability. Nothing really happens just by making policies and programs and all trainings for us. What's really important that leaders have their skin in the game. And we use AI for that, which means that we have a self-identification program for all people from the LGBT plus community. So if I'm from the community, I self-identify myself. And then, of course, I have a choice whether I want to just be open to the D&I team or be open to everyone at IBM. So that helps us keep a tab on how many people are we hiring, how many people are we promoting, how many people are leaving us from this cohort. And this is a large number of people at IBM. So, and that is how it becomes possible for us to talk to those business leaders and have meaningful discussions with insights. So here we are, you say your teams are completely trained, they've done the trainings, but here the numbers are, and then clearly we see a gap. So it becomes easy. And of course, there are teams which may not talk too much about it, but you clearly see that the numbers are growing, people are out, and people feel comfortable. So we use AI for that. The second thing is employee experience. So what we did a few years ago was we came up with an engagement survey, an annual engagement survey, which is actually for employees, for IBMers worldwide. So we have some very pointed questions on inclusion. So we know for every single manager at IBM. So for example, in India, we have about 8,000 managers, and I would know for every single manager what her team says, what the team says about the manager. So on inclusion points, and that speaks volumes, because that is coming, that's anonymous, that's a manager's report by the team. So it just tells us clearly where they stand manager-wise. So it's not just leaders and then there are 8,000 managers and we don't really know, but we go to that nuance and see how is the employee experience, because it's great to talk, great stuff in panels, but on a water cooler conversation, somebody just looks at you and then you don't know. A housekeeping staff just looks at you because you are using a washroom which you are not supposed to use. as per that housekeeping person, and then that's it. You've had a bad experience. So training the vendor staff as well is part of our responsibility. We just make sure that every housekeeping person, every driver, every employee at IBM knows what LGBT plus is all about, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, and there's zero tolerance for bias. That is true. And the third is external eminence. What you talked about is that we are absolutely vocal and visible. So George Floyd got murdered, and that sets an example. Arvind Krishna wrote an open, strong worded letter to the US Congress and said, here's how we can help, and here's what you can do about it. And he immediately, we did away with the facial recognition AI tool that we had worldwide. It took us no time. So what I'm trying to say is that that's how the DNA is, that we will speak openly. In India, we were very vocal even before 2018. So even before September 2018. So, but having said all of that, it's absolutely right that not everybody is completely open and unbiased. And, I'd be lying if I say that, internally and externally. And you face a lot of bias internally as well. You clearly see that some people are very open and some are not. So what we do is we tell them that we have to make sure that they know that it's a business imperative. It's in their benefit actually to be more diverse and inclusive. And also, inclusive leadership is for us not just about diversity and inclusion. It is encompassing of differences beyond gender, beyond sexual orientation, and beyond physical and cognitive ability. And once they know that when you're standing in front of the client and you really want to bring up innovative and creative solutions, you need a diverse team. So there is no other way left but to be inclusive. And that's IBM.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Prachi. And you spoke about the authentic leadership. You spoke about visible leadership, and you're right that everyone has their personal journeys of recognizing their unconscious biases. Recognizing that some of the journeys that they personally have to take to be more inclusive. So I go to Ramki. We discussed about leadership. We discussed about authentic leadership and role modeling. I would like to know from you at Bank of America, how is the organization looks at the leaders to ensure that the conversations around LGBT plus inclusion is embedded in the organization culture and becomes a business as usual, like Prachi mentioned, that it is a business imperative, it is not an HR imperative. So I would like to hear from you.
Yeah. So most importantly, I think the engagement with each and every associate, and particularly at a middle management level. Now, once we provided the right level of resources to the senior management, they are authentic, they are more visible, and like Prachi was saying, we're also measuring their scores, DNI scores at all levels. And these are all vital tools for us to identify where are the gaps. How do we go and ensure that we create the right balance of workforce and also the right inclusive environment in those teams. If there are certain differences, if people are still have cultural differences or any inhibitions, it reflects in the scores. So we identified that, and we also strengthened our ally engagement portal. What we did is we gamified it. We provided a number of vital tools where people could learn, they can participate in a number of activities, and they could also contribute along with the out-at-work associates in terms of telling stories and creating the right kind of culture and so on. So based on the level of contribution, they get certified like a bronze, silver, gold, platinum, and so on. So that is creating a lot of excitement and curiosity amongst our associates to actively engage. Because it's easy to enroll them as an ally member, but it is difficult to sustain unless you gamify and make them very, very interesting and make them engage throughout the journey. The second aspect is the intersectionality, which Zainab talked about. So what we've done is we have 11 networks, 300 chapters across the world, and there are a lot of good lessons that we could learn from each one of these chapters. So we take all those best practices and lessons learned, and we try and emulate some of them in our own local chapters. And we leverage other networks, employee network groups, and like for instance, WITNO, which is a Women in Technology and Operations, is a group that we are leveraging to create the right level of awareness to the women. Similarly, what we also did is the ESG group, which is the Environment, Social and Governance group. We leverage them. In the current pandemic situation, a lot of transgender community is going through a lot of difficulties. So we are using that network to help that particular community and gain their goodwill. The third one is iGen. iGen is the basically the network group which enrolls all the young new associates in the organizations, and they do carry out a wide range of activities across the organization. They really bring the vibrancy. The advantage the iGen group brings to the table is they come with a lot of new perspectives and they are well educated. They've already gone through some amount of training on LGBT and other things. So we are leveraging them to the maximum. So very recently what we did is within my own extended management team, I wanted to create a awareness session. So and we asked the iGen group along with the Align network leader to come and present it in my extended leadership team. So that was a 300, 400 people who joined that particular meeting. While the session, a lot of people, what we assumed is, most of these people will be already aware. This is just not 101, it is 201. But to our surprise, what happened was a lot of those people, as they were going through the session, a lot of them pinged and said, I was not aware of this. It is really, really important that I commit myself 100% to this. I'm going to become an Align member. I'm going to contribute hugely towards this initiative. So that was an eye-opener for us. So now what we have done is we started doing these kind of sessions across the organization. So these are all aspects of that we can do within our organization, which will help us to build the right kind of culture, and one day it will become BAU.
Yeah, thanks, Ramki, for sharing that. You highlighted an interesting point around creating those safe spaces, creating those spaces for conversation around the inclusion. How you could create a space wherein people could speak up without having to speak up and share, much rather to having to worry about what is being assumed. So I would probably go to Zainab on this question, especially from a fact that we are talking about celebrating differences, celebrating spectrum, celebrating shades, and we often create or make an effort to create the safe space for conversation. I would like to hear from you in terms of how can we create that space, the safe space for trans people and GNC people. Many times we have seen that the queer spaces can get easily dominated by the cis gay men. So how do you make sure that the programs, the initiatives, or the employee resource group is put together in such a way that it is inclusive by design?
Interesting question, Srini. I mean, for someone who has been a trans activist for most of my life, this is a situation that I deal with on a day-to-day basis, whether it was in the social development space or to the corporate workspace that I'm now part of. So, for me, I mean, it might sound theoretical, but whether you're talking about the issue of transphobia or misogyny, both have their roots in patriarchy. And when it comes to the issue of patriarchy, that is what we actually need to be challenging on a day-to-day basis. Let me talk about my own experience, and I'll be able to better frame the experience. So, as a young effeminate male, a few years ago, that was before my actual social transition started. And people thought that I was probably an effeminate gay man, not really a trans person. It could be gender. And terms like gender non-conforming were not even around a decade ago. It's just in the last 5 years that our vocabulary and our safe spaces are trying to get more inclusive by using these terminologies. The fact that gender non-conforming and trans persons have been there since times immortal, doesn't really cut ice with anyone. So I think the first part is that you know dead naming a person. And let me kind of tell, we've all got into this campaign where we talk about preferred pronoun, but I think that should have been followed by a campaign to actually talk about your preferred name. While I'm comfortable using my dead name as well, but with certain sections of people, there were certain colleagues who just didn't wanted to make an effort to learn my preferred name. And even when they did, they came up with their own explanations as to why they should call me a shortened version of Zainab and not Zainab. One is that they said they couldn't pronounce it, one they said it was too difficult for them to understand. So they came up with one alphabet word to like 4 alphabets word for me, like Z, Zen, Z, Zui. I mean, they came up with so many different variations that I actually forgot what my real name was. And this is a time where you're actually challenging. A lot of us, hide within the comfort of, let me come to another issue, bathroom access. For a person like me who was trans and who was gender non-conforming for a long time, even within working in the UN system, we did not have a safe bathroom access policy or single-use washrooms at that point. I mean, there was, one washroom dedicated for people who had ability-related issues, but it was more conference venue perspective. So for me, who had to fight my own way through the system to get the single-use washrooms converted into a gender-neutral washroom was a big achievement. But do we kind of be happy with that, or are we going to couple it up or taking it to the next level and saying that, okay, great, what we've done is like a common fix and tell you, we fixed this washroom for you. Access is guaranteed now. But what about in the future? Don't you want to create safe access for all? And that starts your courageous conversations in terms of what is safe bathroom access for all. Some of it is pure myths. Some of it is irrational fear that a trans person may use the bathroom of their choice and end up harassing or bullying people, or women or men might not feel comfortable, but no one talks about the discomfort that the person is feeling, and this is the only safe space which they can use, because safe sanitation is not a privilege, it's an entitlement at the workplace. That number two. The third thing is that in a country which has seen 6 years since the NALSA judgment came in, and a little less than a year of the protection of transgender persons' rights, unfortunately, legal gender recognition is not easy, not affordable, and not accessible to all. So while we may talk about legal gender recognition, preferred names and pronouns, if like my own check before I joined the organization is that they try to see a person with a male name, and at my residence, fortunately people know me for who I am rather than who I was supposed to be according to some of my educational records. So those kind of mismatches, or in terms of creating a successful onboarding program, periodic are virtually not there, and people are actually waiting for some kind of legislative changes to come and happen. And if that is coming in with a bit of compliance, every industry, small, medium, large, is willing to follow that. But the question is, if you want to bring trans people to the mainstream or gender non-conforming people to the mainstream, because unfortunately gender identity and expression or sex characteristics is not something that you can leave at home. I can't unfortunately leave my breast at home and come, or I can't leave my body at home and come. I have to get them to work. And this is something that people need to realize, and it should have actually been a simple case, a business case of accessibility, but rather it is talked about making a moral or an ethical case of accessibility. So my advice for all is stop judging people, and that judgment has to actually start from the leadership. If your leadership is willing to send a signal out to everyone that trans people are not only welcome, they are actually appreciated, celebrated, and we as an organization are going to take an effort to bring someone in a leadership position like what KPMG did with me, is for the first time one of their directors globally is a trans woman. Now that is an issue of pride. They celebrate it, but how many people are actually willing to talk? Back-end jobs, analyst job, great. I mean, that's great inclusion and a great start. But if you want to change, the change has to come from top, not really from people at below. So these are few pointers which I feel, people need to start. And just like the story from what was shared from the Bank of America experience, you have to stand up against transphobia. You have to stand up against misogyny. You cannot afford to be a silent spectator. You cannot afford to allow a transphobic joke to go by. If you really mean inclusion, that inclusion starts with I, and that's for all of you in this room today.
Thanks so much, Zainab. I think you shared some great points, and I know that all the listeners would be making notes. I was doing that. Some great points that I would like to cascade it to my team as well. And Veda, I think I'll come to you. Zainab spoke about these barriers, both what we have in mind and structural barriers. In order to create those safe spaces, in order to make sure that it is not about just accepting, it is about welcoming. So I would like to know from you in terms of the role that the business leaders play in removing those structural barriers, in having those conversations, and what have you seen at Northern Trust, some of the best practices that enable more business managers and leaders to come forward and demonstrate their commitment.
Yeah, no, it's another great question, Srini, and I think diversity and inclusion, right, has been a long time strategy for most companies, both large and small, because it has been clearly proven that diversity in thought and perspective, which comes from a diverse workforce, leads to better results. And that could be either financial results or increased client experience. So business leaders get it. To your point, business leaders get it from that, the reports and the evidence that's kind of come out over the years. But I think when we look at what happened with the Black Lives Movement reigniting in the US and then quickly spreading across the world, I think a lot of companies recognize that there is still a lot of work to be done. And that wasn't necessarily about their particular company, but it was talking about also being active in the community as well. So I think that, there's race relations comes in, has different biases in all different shapes and sizes. And I think we just recognize that there is work that needs to get done. Now, at Northern Trust, and Srini, you and I have had this conversation, DE&I has always been in the DNA of our organization. It's part of our culture. It's just, who we are. And I think, the recipe for our success has been to find leaders that are passionate about a particular aspect of DE&I. I know there's a lot of DE&I leads part of this session today on the panel with me today, as well as watching this session. And so there's so many different aspects. I mean, we're talking about LGBT plus here today, but there's so many different facets of diversity, equity, and inclusion that all of you are trying to drive forward. Gender, LGBT plus, race, religion, veterans, people with disabilities. And I think my advice for all of you who are looking to, kind of drive that forward with the business is, again, find that business leader that already has the passion to drive that particular aspect forward. Tap into that energy, and then your work is almost done, right? I mean, if they've already got that personal passion, and I think you, as diversity, equity, and inclusion leads, you've got all these different facets, right? But if you can focus and find that one out of your senior business managers, I think that's where you can get a lot of your work done. You'll have a spokesperson that can educate and inform your workforce. And then you'll also have a leader that's going to set the right example for DE&I. And sometimes it just takes that one lone voice to start the conversation.
Yeah, fascinating, great points. I'll go to Prachi. Prachi Veda spoke about the cross collaboration between the functional heads and the business leaders. I want to talk to you about the cross collaboration between the ERGs. Right? We all know that there is a greater opportunity when we cross collaborate. It maximizes the impact and inclusivity efforts. So I would like to hear from you that what kind of opportunities that employee resource groups can look at to break silos and collaborate in a more meaningful way.
It's a very interesting question, Srini. I'll tell you, in June, when we were doing all these enablement sessions for managers, for microaggression, and for inclusivity for the LGBT plus community, we invited people from India at that time, because our population in India is quite large, so we do separate sessions for them. And suddenly when we're doing the session, we see people from Europe, people from absolutely every part of the world sending messages to us on chat. And we're like, how, I was not at least expecting that, because everybody's doing these sessions all over IBM. We are very active during the June Pride month, especially. And then, so that's just to give you an example, that they were absolutely very, very excited, celebratory of everything that we were doing at IBM in India, especially because of the 377 Red Dawn. But, one of the reasons why we stopped calling it a ERG and we've started calling it a BRG, Business Resource Group, is clearly an indication that it's a business imperative. It's not just a good to have a cohort of people together and they are sort of talking to each other. So it's a very strategic step for us, where we engage with them, where we value them to the extent that some of them actually represent us in the media. There are many people from the LGBT plus community at IBM who speak to press conferences, who are in newspapers, who are doing podcasts, telling them about what happens at IBM. That is one. Another is engagement sessions, having coach on calls. People, when you are from a community which is not mainstream, at least yet, you have certain things that you may have certain problems, issues, at least for sure in India, that you are not comfortable talking to your family, you're not comfortable talking to your immediate manager, and you want to talk to an expert. And here we have a coach on call, one-on-one service for them. Then every kind of every person is so diverse that you need a career framework, because we just don't want people from the LGBT plus community to be to increase. We actually want them to increase in the senior most positions at IBM. So what we do is we celebrate every out executive, for example. We make a proper announcement, and there's so many executives joining us, but we only make announcements separately for our out executives. So this is another example, and that all this work is happening through our BRGs. So BRGs are very active, strategic hands and legs for the D&I team, and they are of course the voice and home and comfort for people from the community. And this is for women, this is for people with disability, and people from the LGBT plus community.
Wow. Like I could go on for hours. I mean, incredible pearls of wisdom, as I always say, that, some incredible work all of you are driving in your respective organization. But unfortunately, we are almost at the hour. But before we sign off, I want to get one final thought from each one of you in like 30 seconds to the question about the future, because we all are talking about future. So what is future of belonging to you, and how can we create it?
Very quickly, COVID has taught us all that we are all in the same storm, but we're in very different boats. So it is up to us. A lot of us have survived through this. It's up to us to reimagine and be resilient in the future. So my only parting comment is that nothing for us without us. And this is a tagline which I have learned in the UN, but it's something that we said, if you really want to work with marginalized communities, whatever be their orientation, ability, ethnicity, whatever, you have to put them at the heart of development. This is what Mehboob al-Haq also said when he put the first human development report, saying that put people at the heart of development. So for me, inclusion is here. The future is inclusive. The future is you, and inclusion starts with an I. That's it.
Thanks, Zainab. Ramki?
Yeah. So if you look at creating a diverse workforce, and I think we are all getting it. The environment is getting better. More and more people with differences are coming into the workforce. But what we have to realize is the future truly belongs only if we can create an inclusive environment for those people to peacefully coexist. So I think our focus is going to be on just not only on diversity, it's not about metrics. It's also about creating the right kind of ecosystem. So that's where future belongs.
Great. Prachi?
I think to all the listeners, it's time to make a difference that really makes a difference, which means that to be inclusive of others is only possible if we are inclusive of ourselves. And what that means is that there are many things we go on hiding from ourselves and from others. And that takes a lot of our time and energy. So stop doing that. Embrace yourself and embrace others. Only then it's not a lip service, it's reality.
Great, great. Veda?
Thanks, Srini. I guess just a little quick history. So my great-grandparents left India over 100 years ago. I was the first Canadian born in my family. So growing up, people would always ask me where I was from. And when I said Toronto, they would always say, no, where are you really from? And so now that I've moved back to India and I'm here now and I travel around India and people ask me, where am I from? And I say Bangalore. And they're like, no, where are you really from? And so I've never actually been in a racial majority anywhere that I lived. But I really have to thank my parents because I've never felt like I didn't belong. And that's because for me, the future of belonging is about focusing on the things that are similar. When we look at one another, 99.9% of us are the same, and we tend to focus on those differences. So to me, the future of belonging is focusing on those pieces of us that are the same, and we don't focus on those differences. And I think that's where the true future will be.
Fantastic. I mean, I was taking all the notes while you were sharing each of your stories, and believe me, I've already filled in pages of that. But I'm extremely delighted to hear all of your organizations and your personal journeys. And these are affirmative efforts in order to create an inclusive and more workplace where everyone truly belongs. And there's a collective effort that all of us are putting in as a team, I would say, around what we are driving internally as well as externally, the thought leadership and mentorship. So thank you so much, all of you, to all my panelists for making time and joining me for this conversation. And to all the attendees who've tuned in, I hope you've also filled in pages the way I did, and you have some great takeaways from this wonderful conversation we had with Zainab, Prachi, Veda, and Ramki. But before I end the session, I'm reminded of one of my favorite quotes from Helen Keller. Alone, we can do so little. Together, can do so much. I think we are in this together. We have to create something which we truly look forward to as a future for the next generation. To that, I would like to thank you all for joining in once again. Take care, stay safe. Goodbye.